what was the station like back in 1968?
What was the station like in 1968? Well, it was brand new. It was something that a lot of people worked real hard to implement. The whole concept of a 10-watt high school radio station was a very new idea, and a lot of the high schools in the Chicago area kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and Lyons Township was one of the schools, and they were fortunate enough to have, living in LaGrange, a professional consulting broadcast engineer who helped them navigate through the FCC applications and did the technical exhibits and everything that they needed to do to get the station on the air. The students that were involved, the ones that actually started the station, were extremely motivated. They had a vision. They were talented. I mean, I've lost track of those guys, and frankly, they were, at the time I was a freshman and very, brand new to LT, and these students that actually did the radio station applications and brought it from zero to on the air, they were like gods. They were unapproachable, to a freshman, which made it kind of interesting for me because I got to stand back and watch this all happen. And only after I became a sophomore, I got a lot more involved. Actually, most of the students who started the radio station graduated right when the thing went on the air. They just got to see the very beginning of it, and then they were on to college or what have you. So I was fortunate enough to be one of the people who carried on from the very genesis of the thing, and it was very interesting. It was a labor of love for everyone, I think.
Two small things. Frank? I'm not sure. So that was in the shop the entire time. That'll be fine. I'm not going to ask you to repeat yourself.
Yeah.
But if you'd like to, but I may or may not just use that just because that Adobe. So if you want to repeat yourself, what you said, like later on.
Sure.
Like I would have
or
no
something,
problem with
something
that.
like that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So I already asked this. So what was like a typical show like? How were they run?
A typical show, people got like an hour to do a show because our hours were very limited. I think the station went on the air at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and went off on a weekday at 6. I mean, it was really like an after-school activity. And weekends, there were weekend shows, but typically where the station really shined was in sports. Back in the early 70s, I think it was the class of 71 or the class of 70. Anyway, whatever, one of those years, LT went and won the state championship, and WLTL did live remotes from Champaign with our own students calling the games. And I remember, I was on the engineering side, so I remember sitting at the championship game when they won the championship. I was sitting in the studio monitoring the telephone line connection that had our game on it, and it was exciting. I was sitting there by myself, and I was just ramped up because I'm listening to these play-by-play announcers, and in retrospect, that was a really big deal for a bunch of high school kids to put together a live remote from out of town, and the students who actually called the game, I mean, they were just so excited, and everybody at LT was ramped up because we were the state champs, and I'll never forget that, just because that was one of those events that proved that WLTL was worth something. It wasn't just an after-school babysitter activity or something. I mean, it really had some community significance, and that, in the long run, I think that's where WLTL, why it lasted 50 years. It's not because it was just a fun thing for students to do after school. It was a career builder, and it had community significance.
That's interesting. We still have the same thing. We still have an engineer in the studio, and we still have people commentating outside. It's the exact same thing. Yeah. Do you remember? This is like off topic. I'm probably not going to put this in. Do you guys remember? Did you guys do away games?
Yeah.
You did away
I mean,
games?
if it was an away game like a championship or something,
Right.
I mean, for the most part, the home games. You have to remember, back in those days, today you use the internet to get audio from here to there. In the '60s, and heck, until the turn of the century or later, you still had to get a telephone line or some kind of telephone company connection between the remote and your studio, and that was it was an expensive proposition, and it was a connection that you had to do well in advance. You couldn't just order it and have it ready tonight. It was something they ordered a week in advance. And so, the state championship, we knew that we were going to go to the state, and so we figured out where the phone line had to be on the other end, and the phone company was contacted, and I don't know how many hundreds of dollars it cost to put that phone line in, but, it worked, and, we went on the air.
Yeah, sorry, because one of the things we brought on ourselves this year is that we covered every single football game.
That's
Every
cool.
We were really.
Well, think about that, from the perspective of the students who are on the, actually doing the game. You're supporting your own school, for one thing, but you are training and getting, real world experience for a job that is the kind of job that lots of people, people would like to be a sportscaster. And, if you get that kind of experience in high school and you can demonstrate that, you go to a college that has radio, you got a job. I mean, you got something to do. And, if you pursue that and are good at it and really know your sport that you're covering, you got a job when you're out of school. And that's really what it's all about.
So you mentioned that the championship game was one of your favorite memories, which totally makes sense. Do you have any other special memories that you've always remembered throughout all these years?
Well, a lot of it has to do with some of the mischief that we, one of the things about WLTL back then is we had a faculty sponsor, but it was one person, and quite honestly, most of the time we were at the station, we were unsupervised by faculty, which I know was a point of contention because sometimes we were a little noisy, and sometimes people were running up and down the halls and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I have to say, the things I remember the most were some of the fun we had just just messing around. And but we were doing radio too, so we would make these wacky promos, and we were, of course, editing in those days was not sitting in front of a computer. There was no computer. You had rolls of audio tape, and you're sitting there with a tape machine, and you're shuttling this tape back and forth, listening to and find where you want to cut it. Then you come over there and physically cut the tape with a razor blade and splice it together with another piece of tape. I mean, it was a project to edit, and so we would edit little wacky programs and little promos and humorous stuff, and that's what we were getting into. I don't know. I think the things I remember the most are some of the friendships that I made, and people that we all left WLTL with in the back of our minds. We were all thinking, wow, we're going to get into this business, and we're all going to be a star DJ in Chicago or something. And some of us did, and a lot of us took other careers. And I guess it was interesting to when I left school and I graduated, there were a whole crowd of us that thought we'd end up in radio somehow, or and of all of us, I think maybe 10% of us actually went into the field in some way, shape. But others, went into similar activities and careers, and some people, one of my closest friends on the radio station ended up being an architect, and another one ended up being an attorney, and you just go your own way. But it was, when we all left, it was like, oh yeah, this is what we want to do.
So you mentioned a lot of things that seem like kind of similar to what I've done with my friends at the station. So, but what are some things that you think have changed, or at least the most prominent?
Okay, I thought about this before I came here because I knew I was going to be asked that question, and I can tell you, I haven't had a chance, and one of the things I was kind of sorry about was, I live far away, and I really don't have a chance to come in and watch today's students interact with, being on the radio. The media landscape has really changed. When I was a student here, there was no internet. I mean, there was nothing like that. Radio was it. Today, you've got terrestrial radio, you've got podcasts, you've got all kinds of other social media, all kinds of other directions in which somebody can go to express him or herself. And right now, the career direction that you might take leaving LT is going to be different than what my peer students had to look forward to. I mean, we were radio, or we were maybe you went into television, but those were really tightly well-defined careers. Today, the internet is so broad, and we don't even know what's going to come around next year, 5 years from now. We really don't. That's one difference. The other difference from my perspective, and I've been technically oriented. I mean, my whole career was involved with the technical aspects of broadcasting. And the one thing it got me thinking, if I could go back to 1968 and transport equipment or tools that we used to do radio in 1968 to today, what of that equipment would still be relevant? And you know what? The only thing that would still be relevant is this microphone. This microphone here in 2017 works the same and is basically the same as a microphone that I would have used in 1968. But that's the only thing that's the same. Everything else in this radio station is different. It's digital, it's based on internet protocol. In our day, it was all analog, everything, tubes, electron tubes in the equipment, the regulations that the FCC held us to. I mean, everybody that was on the air had to have a license, and you had to go down to the Federal Building in Chicago and take a test to get this license. So that was a ritual every semester or quarter when we had new people that wanted to get involved. They had to go and read this book and then go down to FCC at the Federal Building and take a test, get this license, and then they were legally able to get on the radio. You don't have anything like that today. I mean, the equipment is stable. There's no regulatory anything dictating what you can do, except you still can't swear on the air, and you still can't offend people maliciously and things like that. But basically, the technology has advanced so greatly that all of these, the overlay that existed at the time in 1968, just because the technology was not very advanced, that's all gone. So I look around this studio here, and the functions. We still have a mixing board that you raise the sound level and everything, but the innards of that are completely different, and that's what's so striking to me. I mean, this just coming back here 50 years later and looking around at what you guys have to work with today is remarkable.
2 more questions.
Okay.
But everything you've said is on. I could hear you talk all day. This is really cool, actually. What was this is a good. Do you remember the first award that WLTL won?
I don't, because I'm not sure that we won any awards when I was had any tenure. I don't think there was any kind of competition. The first award that I can remember hearing about, it was somewhere, way in the future of my tenure. There was I know that John Drury, the news guy, that I never worked with, but he was an active newscaster when I worked in Chicago television. I know there was an award named after him that I know LT has won a couple of times, or not many times. I don't remember that there was any competition of any sort in my tenure there. Now maybe I'm wrong. I just don't remember that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, we consider them a plague. we can't.
Well, you know what? You shouldn't consider that to be a plague. I mean,
well, just spatially.
I know, but I look at that and I like to feel like it's kind of like being the first man on the moon. I mean, maybe other guys came after you and people built on your experience, and I look at that and I go, wow, we were like the first wave, and all right, maybe we didn't win any awards, but we laid the groundwork and proved that the students here could run a radio station. And we had no budget, we had no money to work with. Our equipment was whatever we could scrounge up, and now, as far as I can tell, just by looking around what I see here and the investment that the Board of Education has made in this place, I mean, this is the real thing. And I'm just happy to see that A, it's lasted 50 years, and B, that it's become such a success. And and you look at the list of alumni that have come out of here that are successfully applying their trade in broadcasting. I mean, I'm very proud of that, even though I didn't really have anything to do with it other than being part of the first group that was able to make sound come out of a speaker.
That's awesome. That's honestly really cool. Yeah, that is something very special. And I guess, yeah, I guess maybe as the last question, I mean, do you have any closing thoughts, something you wanted to say that you didn't really get a chance to because my questions didn't allow for it?
I don't know. I guess I would address my comments to students who are in this organization and participating right now. I would say to them, take advantage of it. Learn from it. There's always going to be a place for people who are communicators, and we don't, the way the communications media are today. 10 years ago, we never would have envisioned it. Certainly 50 years ago, when I was at this radio station, who knew? I mean, the whole world has changed. The other side of that coin is 50 years from now, maybe they call you and have you come back, and you look around at where the communications media are 50 years from now. Compare that to where it is today, and ask yourself that same question. What would you think? All I can say is this place was a springboard for me. It inspired me to enter a communications field, and I spent more time in television than radio, but that was kind of the luck of the draw on my part. It happened, I got a job in TV instead of radio. But, is there going to be TV in 25 years? Is there going to be TV in 50 years? Is like we know it today? I doubt it. I doubt it. I'm not sure it's going to be here in 10 years, the way technology is advancing. But what you can learn at WLTL is how to express yourself, how to manipulate images and sounds to express an idea, to convince people of something, to advertise something, to sell something. And those are valuable tools, no matter what your career path is. And if you choose to go into communications, I can assure you that there is no better place to start than right here. And I say that with all honesty and commitment. I've told people throughout my career that you know, the experiences that I got at WLTL and secondarily at the, you know, when I left WLTL, left LT, I went to Southern Illinois University, and they had a very excellent college radio station that I got involved in between those two places that really formulated my desire to enter the field and pursue a career in communications media. So, you know, no matter what your specific interest is in communications, if it's verbal, if it's visual, if it's musical, you know, here's a great place to play around and learn from other people and learn your own capabilities and hope you you know, make right decisions in the future. There's a lot of that too, but this is a great background. This is a gem. It really is.